Hello, I'm Lawrence, and welcome to my art channel. Today, we're starting a journey. A doll customizing an art channel has been a dream of mine for a long time, and I'm finally doing it. To start, I'm going to introduce myself with a Dollsona. I'm using this made-to-move Barbie as my base. Posability is important to me. Here you can get a good look at all the moving parts on this Barbie. Aren't they beautiful? Now, let's take her head off. If you are new to doll customizing, welcome, and fear not, I will explain as I go. But if you're seasoned, you know what's going on here. I use hot water to soften the doll head and remove it. The hair is not the right color, so it has to go. I cut the hair down as short as I can, then I use a screwdriver to scrape the insides and clear out all the plugs completely. This process takes far too long in my opinion, but it can be nice. It's a good way to set the mood for myself for a project, because one of the very first things you should know about me is that I am impatient. I am also always working on about 6 projects at once, so doing the slow parts lets me start planning for what I'm going to do in the downtime of each step. Well, while I'm on that, I guess I should also do a quick introduction. Like I said, my name is Lawrence. You can call me Law. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a nerd. Some things that inspire me are fantasy, sci-fi, horror, space, and cool tattoos. You'll see a lot of those themes pop up in my work. Now I use 100% acetone to remove the factory paint from the doll head. I make sure to get the hairline too, as I'll be using a completely different color for the base. I use a Q-tip to make sure it's very clean. I then wash it with soap and water to get all the chemicals off so they don't damage the vinyl, and set it aside to dry. In the meantime, I'm going to flatten this doll's chest as much as I can. They don't need those. The most important part of this step, in my opinion, is the safety goggles. I was doing this for another project once and was saved by them when my Dremel blade broke and went flying. It was pretty scary. I can't stress enough that if you're working with power tools or chemicals, you should always take safety precautions. I've had dead bird formaldehyde in my eyes. I am an expert. I'll be using this blade to cut down the chest into small sections. If you try to do it all at once, the plastic heats up and melts instead of cutting. I try to clear away as much bulk as I can on this step. I can usually go pretty flat, but this doll needed a little extra care as it does have the upper body joint, and I wanted to make sure not to damage it. Next, I sand it down with a different attachment. This gives me more control and allows me to start really getting it flush with the rest of the chest. As you can see here, it gets pretty flat. Yeah, definitely better than what it was. If only it was that easy, am I right? Next, I start to refill and reconstruct the chest with epoxy sculpt. I always try to wear gloves when working with this material. My first pass is intended to just fill in the holes that I've created. I try to make sure that I don't accidentally attach it to the joint on the inside. Once I have it filled and it's dried, you can see that it's bulky. That's fine. I take some sandpaper to it and get to work on smoothing it down to be flush again. This process can take a while, which I hate, so I might as well make it even longer and do the full body. Sanding it down will allow me to have a base to blush the doll on later. Here's where you can start to see those fantasy elements come in. Sorry, I can't help it. There was a 0% chance that a doll that was supposed to represent me was going to just be some guy. Using the wire, I begin to form the structure of a set of horns. Tiefling horns specifically. Yeah, to likely nobody's surprise, I'm a big fan of tabletop RPGs. I twist the ends together for extra strength and match it on my doll head to make sure it's the right size. Looks pretty good there, only a couple of adjustments. I then take the ends of the armature and thread them through a couple of existing hair holes. It can be a little difficult, but I do my best to make sure they're completely symmetrical, and I think I got pretty close. Not bad at all. The wires are twisted on the inside, and I dab a bit of glue in there just for extra security. I let it set before I start the next session of sculpting. Once again, my first pass is just to start to get the bulk of the horns laid down. Once that's dried and strong, I can start adding the details. For the horns, I wanted to add a ridge effect. I started from the top of the horn and added each layer, working my way down to the bottom. I used this sculpting tool that I stole from my friend, Claire, to smooth out the clay with water. For the most part, I don't mind if these look a little rough. It makes them look organic. When the first horn is done, I move on to the same process for the second horn. Also, I apologize that I occasionally move out of frame. I've never filmed my work exactly like this before, so it's a learning curve. It mostly affected little details where I had the camera zoomed in like this, and I plan to make a lot of projects very similar to this process in the future, so it's a problem that must be solved. The need for a D&D doll series demands it, so look forward to that. I ended up with a better tripod partway through this video, so it'll improve hopefully and won't be a problem in the future. Jeez. We're still not done with that first horn. Alright, you get the idea. Let me hand wave that second one. There we go. See? All done. With the body mods finished and the horns all set, I can now put the doll back together. Also, peep those little jewelry details I sculpted left to center there. We'll come back to those. And voila! They are whole again. Also, I added elf ears. Don't question me. Here, I'm starting to paint the horns. This has to be done first, before I lay the hair down since I don't want to damage it. I decided to do a nice solid black. You know, keep it simple. It can't compete with the future design elements of this doll. Getting a solid coat is easy and quick, which means it's my favorite part of the process so far. Next, I decided to paint in my hair colors. I start with the brown for my undercut. And don't mind that shiny orange, I had to improvise a bit, as I was out of matte yellow paint, gold had to suffice. The next part of this process is adding the flocking to the undercut. Obviously, this is going to be a two-toned hairstyle. The flocking is made out of finely cut yarn. I prefer yarn hairstyles for most of my dolls. It's more accessible, looks great, and is more posable than nylon. Next, I pull out this bright orange. Fun fact, this is one of my favorite colors. And it's certainly my favorite color to have my hair. I use this orange yarn to make some yarn wefts, and then start to glue them down to the head with Mod Podge. I take extra care around the horns to get them to lay out exactly how I want them to. Once styled, the hair will fold back into the side around the horns and hide the connection points. I then take this razor and shave it all down to about the right length. However, I'm going to hold off on finishing styling till later. Now, as I mentioned before, I think tattoos are so very, very cool. I don't have any, tragically, but if I did, and if it was socially acceptable in corporate America, this is what I'd have. Oh, the inhumanities that paying rent forces upon you. Regardless, I love neck blackouts and I love space themes, so that's what I did. Neck blackout with stars. I tried white stars first, but thought they were a bit too stark, so switched them to gold. Also, you can peep that I painted the ears and chest to match the body of the doll. It's a near perfect match. I'm very proud of it. So here's the reason I haven't styled the hair yet. We still have to do all the body blushing and face up. I tie the hair back with a protective scrap fabric layer and use pins to secure it so that it doesn't get any sealant on it. I use Mr. Super Clear Matte to seal the body and face first, so the pastels and watercolor pencils will have some tooth to stick to when I start to lay it down. I then start blushing the joints and other parts of the body. I use it to highlight areas of the sculpt, which I love to do. So many interesting details appear. I then move on to laying down the blush on the face and lightly sketching out the expression. There's layers of Mr. Super Clear put down between these details being added, but I try to get as much as I can into each layer. I clean the blush up with a pink eraser. It works well for this purpose. So do kneaded erasers, but I couldn't find mine for the life of me, so these work too. The mouth kept giving me problems. I think the sculpt of the lips reads very feminine to me, which is something I didn't want to emphasize, but likewise, I didn't want them to be too demure. I worked on them the most in this face-up. I cut a lot of it out before I finally found somewhere to settle. To no one's surprise, those fantasy features are back. It's something about the black sclera, man. I love them. I think they're so neat. My eyes are not this green either, but the doll has horns, so you'll just have to accept it. I added in pupils and hated them, so I ditched them. I then added some texture to some of the blushing with my watercolor pencils. I really like the way this effect looks close up on a doll. There's something about it that feels illustrative. All that said and done, the face-up and the body are finished, so it's time to move on to the next step: clothes. Now this next technique I'm going to show you, also say hi to Magnus and Meryl, is a technique my friend Claire at Nerdy Niblets taught me. If you don't have a pattern for a doll, this is a pretty simple way to get the base of one without doing math. Side note, I love math, I just think this is more intuitive. First things first, I cover this doll in a protective layer of paper towels, and then I start to tape it down. I used duct tape for this, but masking tape works just as well. I just couldn't find mine. I guess this is another fun fact, I lose everything all the time. Once you have your doll fully covered, you can cut out seams. I usually cut down the back and sides of the legs and arms. Also, I don't usually fully cover the doll because I usually don't need two of everything. I'm just using this to make a pattern, and they can be repeated. Once I have my pieces, I transfer them to paper and make sure I have a seam allowance on them. These are the fabrics I plan to use for the outfit. For this, I wanted to replicate a shirt that I made for myself last year. You'll never guess what themes it uses. That's right, stars and space. The embellishments are hand embroidered in, and it took me hours. I would not recommend it. I will almost certainly do it again. So yeah, that's the outfit. The final step of this process is the accessories. One of the things I really wanted to incorporate into this outfit is a pair of orange sunglasses I have. But glasses are hard to make for dolls. However, hard to make has never stopped me before, so I gave it the good old college try. In this process, I used some plastic from a doll box that I had laying around. I then also used a makeup sponge, Duraclear gloss varnish, and a liquid watercolor. I thought the gloss varnish would probably seal the watercolor well, and the liquid watercolor is very concentrated, so it could almost be used as a dye in this case. The makeup sponge gives the work a very consistent texture and doesn't create lines like a paintbrush might. I laid the layers down super thin, and as established, I'm impatient, so I used a hairdryer to get them to dry faster. I kept building and building until I finally had this. I'm very happy with it. It almost looks like stained glass. Noting that for later. So after all that, I cut some teeny tiny circles from it and glued it into a wire frame I built. Voila! Glasses. They're not the best, but they're also not the worst. I'm happy with them, and that's what matters. To finalize this, I added a chain to the necklace pendant I made earlier and painted the earrings. I ended up losing one of them to my carpet when I tried to attach it to the doll. That's fine, I can have one earring. It's a look I wear often anyways. So now, it's time to put it all together. Hi, nice to meet you, and welcome to my, box. I wanted it to act as some sort of light box to take detail photos in, but really, it's just kind of empty. Usually, I take my photos outside, but, well, it looks like this out here, with more on the way. We're having a light snow year. So back inside the light box I go. But it's just not right. What I really need is, a house. I had the thought, blacked out, and woke up the next morning and I'd built this lovely backdrop. I didn't film a single bit of it, for some reason. But I'm thinking I'll put a bookshelf over here. Oh, I have so many doll-inspired book projects planned. And then a cozy fireplace and mantle right over here. Obviously, this candle won't be staying, but for now it works as my chair and table. Oh, also I have this. Isn't it fun? So, I hope you enjoyed this video. Also, look at my cool paintings. I'm planning to have at least one doll video out every month, along with all the other projects I'll be doing here. Speed paints, costume making, linoleum prints. I have so many projects planned, and honestly, I was going to do them all anyways, so I thought it'd be fun to share them with you. If you'll join me, of course. I hope that you will. Until the next video, stay safe, stay happy, stay cool. Catch you on the flip side.